You know that life we've all been told to want? Work hard for 40 years, save everything you can, and then finally get to enjoy retirement? Well, what if that whole idea is built on a flawed promise? That's the huge question at the heart of Timothy Ferriss's game-changing book, The 4-Hour Workweek. In this explainer, we're going to dive into his guide for completely rethinking our relationship with work, with wealth, and with life itself.
This quote from Mark Twain is really the perfect place to start. It's a challenge, right? It's asking us to question the default path, the one that so many of us are on without even thinking about it. It suggests that maybe, just maybe, the comfort of doing what everyone else is doing should be a warning sign, a signal to just pause for a second and ask, hey, is there a better way?
And that really is the million-dollar question we're exploring. Is this so-called deferred life plan, suffer now so you can live later, is that really our only option? Or could it be a kind of trap that just eats up our most precious non-renewable assets, our time and our energy?
Okay, so to really get the alternative, we first have to understand the problem. And the core issue, according to Ferriss, is that we have a really flawed definition of success. It's a definition that, more often than not, doesn't lead to a fulfilled life, but to something he calls the living dead.
This story from the book is just wow. It's so telling. Here's a guy who achieved everything society tells us is success. The money, the businesses, the stuff, only to turn around and admit that it was all for nothing. He was one of the living dead, someone who won the game but realized he'd lost his own life in the process.
So, if the old game is broken, what's the new one? The book lays out a radical alternative, a completely new way of thinking, and it's all embodied by this group he calls the new rich.
This chart just lays out the two mindsets so clearly. On the left, you've got the old way, the deferred life plan. Here, it's all about absolute income, how much money you make, period. And you put off your dreams till you're 65. But on the right, you have lifestyle design. This one's all about relative income. It's not just how much you make, but how much time it costs you. And instead of one giant retirement at the end, you sprinkle mini retirements and adventure throughout your entire life.
So who are these new rich people? Well, they're not necessarily rolling in cash. Their wealth isn't really measured in dollars, it's measured in freedom. The freedom to pick what they do, when they do it, and from where in the world they do it. Their true currency is time and mobility. And that mobility comes from building automated systems that don't chain them to one single place.
And this is such an important point to get. This isn't about just sitting on a beach and doing nothing for the rest of your life. It's about replacing the 9-to-5 grind with things that actually excite you. Maybe that's starting a business you're passionate about, or learning to tango in Argentina, or mastering a new skill. The goal is to live a full, amazing life right now. So how do you even start down this path? Well, the book's first rule is probably not what you'd expect. It says, for a minute, forget about your goals. Instead, you need to start by clearly and precisely defining your fears. This quote just nails a deep psychological truth, doesn't it? We stay in jobs we don't like, in lives that don't fulfill us, because the fear of the unknown just feels so much scarier than the misery we're used to. The book argues that this fear is mostly an illusion, and it actually gives you a system to take it apart, piece by piece. This is the process he calls fear setting. First, you have to get super specific. What is the absolute worst thing that could possibly happen if you took that leap of faith? You lose your job? Go broke? Then you brainstorm all the ways you could prevent those things from happening. And finally, you game out how you'd get back on your feet if the worst actually happened. And here's the big aha moment. Once you write it all down and look at it, you almost always realize that the nightmare scenario isn't permanent, and it's probably reversible. The real risk isn't in making a change. The real risk is the guaranteed cost of spending the next 10, 20, 40 years doing something that makes you miserable. Okay, so once you've stared your fears in the face, the next step is all about freeing up your time. And this isn't about being more efficient or cramming more into your day. It's about being more effective. It's about the art of ruthless elimination. And the whole philosophy really hinges on this one simple but incredibly powerful ratio. You might have heard of it. It's the Pareto principle. So simply put, about 80% of your best results come from only 20% of your efforts. Ferriss actually figured this out in his own business. He saw that just 5 of his 120 customers were bringing in 95% of his revenue. The other 115 were just a huge waste of time. So what did he do? He fired all the problem customers to focus on the ones that mattered. His income doubled, and his work hours just plummeted. Applying this can literally change your life. You find that critical 20% of your work that actually moves the needle. For everything else, that other 80%, you follow a strict protocol. Eliminate, automate, or delegate. Eliminate means going on a low-information diet to cut out distractions and learning to say no. Automate is all about building a business muse, something that can run itself and generate income, which is your ticket to freedom. And delegate means using tools like virtual assistants for anything you can't get rid of or automate. Of course, some things are just, well, they're beyond repair. And for those situations, the book gives us this pretty funny Mad Libs resignation letter. It's a bit of a joke, but it's also a reminder that sometimes the most effective move you can make is to just walk away entirely. A dramatic exit is one way to go, but real change usually starts with smaller internal shifts. We've talked about the problem, the philosophy, the tools, but none of that means anything without taking action. So let's talk about taking that first, all-important step.
First things first, we have to completely redefine what failure means. The real failure isn't trying something and not having it work out. The real failure is a life of boredom, just accepting a mediocre status quo because it's comfortable. That's the true worst-case scenario.
Look, making a real change is going to feel uncomfortable. That's pretty much a guarantee. The secret is to see that feeling of discomfort not as a stop sign, but as a compass, one that's pointing you directly toward growth. You can actually train yourself, little by little, to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Ultimately, you can't just think your way into a new life. You have to act your way into it. Just like this quote says, happiness isn't something you find by planning and worrying forever. It's what happens when you start taking action, even if it's small, imperfect action.
And that leaves us with this final question. For you, don't think about changing your entire life tomorrow. Think smaller. What is one tiny, manageable, but slightly uncomfortable step you can take this week? Maybe it's just writing down your fears on a piece of paper. Maybe it's saying no to one thing you don't want to do. That first step is everything. So what's yours going to be?